Punk rock. If you're watching this video, you know what kind of music that term refers to. If you don't, get out of here. Like many generic genre labels, though, punk can be made more confusing by simply adding a post to it. This has been proven the case with post-rock, which I've already talked about, post-metal, which I'll talk about someday, and post-punk. In today's video, I'm going to be going over what post-punk means, the history of the term, as well as some bands in the genre that I think are particularly noteworthy. As always, this is not a definitive list of good post-punk bands, and my personal tastes will inevitably influence the groups that I talk about the most. I'll try to include bands that are somewhat varied in sounds as to provide a more all-encompassing scope of the genre. Also, since I'm planning on making a goth video at some point in the future, I'm saving certain groups for then. So, spoiler alert, there will be no Bauhaus or Susie and the Banshees today. Also, I did listen to Wire, and I enjoyed them a great deal, but for the sake of time, I didn't include them in the video. I still absolutely encourage you to check them out. Let's cut to the chase. First off, let's discuss what post-punk actually is and how the term came to be used. In order to establish a clear timeline, we first have to determine when punk first came to be. Punk rock came out of proto-punk, a movement that really deserves a video of its own. For the sake of simplicity, let's say that the first proto-punk song was 1964's You Really Got Me by the Kinks. It was one of the first rock songs to have an extra layer of grit to it, and its influence is still being felt today. Throughout the mid to late 60s and early 70s, bands such as The Stooges, Death, no, not that one, there you go, and the Sonics became some of the most well-known bands in the proto-punk movement. It even reached down to South America with Peru's Los Psychos forming in 1964. The term punk rock began to be used among music writers consistently in the early 70s. Now, determining which year punk rock became a distinct genre with an agreed-upon meaning can be extremely difficult. Personally, I would say it was 1976. That was the year when, in America, the Ramones released their debut self-titled album, and in England, The Damned released their debut single, New Rose. So that's punk for you. Now how about post-punk? Well, as is the case with all genres of music, as soon as punk was established, people began tweaking with it and messing with it. They took the spiritual ethos of punk, namely the DIY attitude, but began adding new influences. These influences included synthesizers, slower tempos, bass lines that didn't always follow what the guitar was doing, and an exploration of moods that weren't necessarily aggressive. It'll make more sense once I actually go band by band and explain the songs. For the sake of simplicity, let's define post-punk as music with punk vibes, but that isn't exactly punk. Punk rock made by art school kids, basically, but not art punk. That's different. This new style of music was simply titled new music at first. For a period of time, many post-punk bands were referred to as new wave. Once new wave properly developed itself as an entirely separate genre, these bands were retroactively recategorized. One thing that should be stressed is that the post in post-punk really doesn't make much sense as far as timelines go, since many bands were formed around the same time that punk rock was really coming into form. There's also a great deal of contention about what bands should be deemed fitting of the label. Music writer Simon Reynolds, who experienced viewers of this channel will recognize from my post-rock video, wrote a whole book about the start of the genre, Rise Up and Start Again, post-punk 1978 to 1984. It was critiqued by some, however, for being too broad in its definition. This is giving me a headache, let's move on. With the history lesson out of the way, I want to start talking about some bands. First off, quite possibly the most influential group in the genre, Joy Division. For a band that was only around for a total of 4 years, Joy Division has proven arguably the most influential band in the post-punk genre. With their dark, gloomy musical atmosphere, they've also been considered an influence on the goth genre, but that's a story for another day. Coming out of Manchester, the group was originally named Warsaw before they changed their name as a reference to the forced prostitution chambers of Nazi concentration camps. After juggling drummers for a year, they settled on a 4-piece lineup of Ian Curtis on vocals, Bernard Sumner on guitar, Peter Hooky Hook on bass, and Stephen Morris on drums. Their debut release, the Ideal for Living EP, was released on June 3rd, 1978. Recorded entirely in one day with a budget of only £400, this release is notable mainly for acting as a starting point for what the band would eventually do. Kinda superfluous, but you know, it's still very much a good listen. I'd say you should check it out. On June 17th, 1979, Joy Division released one of the most famous t-shirt designs of all time, Unknown Pleasures. This is one of the darkest albums of all time. Even the opening track, Disorder, which has an overall upbeat tempo, manages to somehow be both happy and depressing. This is a perfect album to discover as an edgy, depressed teenager. It also features New Dawn Phase, which is one of the heaviest non-metal songs ever written. One of the first things different about this album is Curtis's vocals. Whereas he had previously been singing in a typical punk rock quasi-shouting style, on this album, he begins singing in a low baritone that really helps the music stand out. Every member of the band brings their absolute all. Sumner's guitar playing always fits exactly what the song needs. On Shadow Play, he plays a simple but sweet guitar solo, and on She's Lost Control, he plays only one riff the entire song. He never does too much, which is something many rock guitarists need to learn how to do. Hooky's bass playing is a true standout feature and helps set the standard for post-punk bass as a whole. On Disorder and She's Lost Control, he plays lead bass lines with his characteristic down-picking style, while making the unconventional choice to heavily feature the D and G strings instead of just playing low notes. He can still play low, and on New Dawn Fades, he mostly sticks to the same 4 notes, which helps to lay a concrete foundation for the rest of the song. Underneath everything is Stephen Morris, the human drum machine himself. His playing never strays even a single beat out of tempo. Can you tell I love this album? Also, I've gone as long as I can without mentioning that, in addition to his skills as a singer and songwriter, Ian Curtis was also an incredible dancer. This was followed by the standalone single Transmission, a song which is tighter than a new pair of shoes on a rainy day. Another standalone single would come after, Love Will Tear Us Apart, which has some of Hooky's best bass playing and demonstrates an increased interest in synthesizers, with them almost completely replacing the guitar. Their second album, Closer, was released on July 18th, 1980. Man, I thought Unknown Pleasures was depressing. This album is just devastating. While not drastically different from their debut, it shows a progression in their sound. Firstly, the songs are longer, with 3 of the 9 songs being over 6 minutes. There are also elements from the outside genres, such as the tribal-sounding drums on Atrocity Exhibition and a synthesizer on Isolation. Colony has bass and guitar, which made me groove in my seat as soon as I heard it, and A Means to an End has a really danceable bass line. The best song on this album by far is The Eternal. In my opinion, this is the darkest song in their entire discography. The guitar and synths play an atmospheric line and the drums are doing an ominous beat. The piano plays a creepy little line at parts and Curtis's vocals are as gloomy as ever. It's phenomenal. Ian Curtis would tragically commit suicide on May 18th, 1980, 2 months before Closer was actually released, and the band broke up as a result. The 3 remaining members would go on to form New Order. Wait, wrong picture. There we go. Well, I don't know if I would call them the first post-punk band. Joy Division defined what the genre would be. Now it's time to talk about another Manchester-based band, a group of people known as The Fall. When I refer to The Fall as a group of people, I wasn't being entirely accurate. They would be best described as Mark E. Smith featuring a group of people. They've had an incredibly unstable lineup that would put Guns N' Roses and Megadeth to shame. Of their 66 all-time members, a third would be involved for only less than a year. Formed in 1976 by the aforementioned Mark E. Smith, don't forget the E. He's never just Mark Smith. The Fall would last until Smith's 2018 passing. During that time, they released 31 studio albums and numerous live recordings, and were the favorite band of famed British DJ John Peel. While I had heard a lot about The Fall before I made this video, I had never listened to an album of theirs all the way through. For a band with a discography as large as theirs, I had to naturally exclude a lot of their releases. They're the anti-Joy Division in that sense. The two albums I decided to listen to were 1982's Hex Induction Hour and 1985's This Nation's Saving Grace, since I get the impression from reading about them that they're generally considered among their best. If I could sum up The Fall's sound in one sentence, it would be Joy Division but not as sad. Hex Induction Hour was a terrific listening experience. One thing that stood out right away was the rhythm section. The Fall had two drummers on this album, and on songs like Fortress Deer Park, they really pop. The bass playing is also terrific. It's clear that Steve Hanley took a lot of inspiration from Peter Hook on this album, and his playing on The Classical and Winter Hostel Maxi is super well done. Speaking of the latter song, it segues into Winter 2, but the transition is so seamless that I actually didn't notice it at first. Very nice. Mark E. Smith's singing is one of the highlights. I love singers whose accents you can hear, and he very much sounds English.
I tell the swamp donkey to sack it before I give her a tonk in a tradesman's entrance and have a lick me yarbles.
His manner of delivery is cool, too. He sounds less like he's singing and more like he's making a declaration. This is especially true in The Classical and Hip Priest. This Nation's Saving Grace is considered a far more, not exactly pop, but more mainstream album. Most of this was due to the introduction of guitarist Brix Smith. This is especially apparent on Barmy, Spoilt Victorian Child, and L.A., which all feature terrific hooks. Hanley continues his bass dominance on songs like Bombast and What You Need. Overall, this is a great listen, but I'll admit that I definitely prefer Hex Induction Hour. Mark E. Smith's lyric writing ability deserves praise. He had a unique ability to come up with the most random scenarios and topics to write songs about. One example is How I Wrote Elastic Man. It's about a writer who wrote a great novel about the titular Elastic Man, but has since suffered severe writer's block and is tired of people coming up to him on the street and asking him how he wrote such a great novel. Oswald Defense Lawyer is a song about Lee Harvey Oswald, the man who definitely did kill JFK, in an alternate universe where he lives to face trial. A huge part of The Fall's legacy has to do with the persona of Mark E. Smith. He had what Wikipedia termed a difficult and complex personality, which typically is code for he's an asshole. For starters, for someone who named his band after an Albert Camus novel, he was strongly anti-intellectual. He probably ran into more than a few snobby music fans who tried to overanalyze his lyrics, which must have rubbed him the wrong way. Northern English to his core, he hated London. However, he also hated many of those in the Manchester scene. In particular, his hatred of Morrissey was so extreme that he referred to him only as Stephen, his actual first name. I gotta hand it to him, that's pretty funny. Chock full of sharp wit, his interviews usually had tons of great quotes, although it was usually 50-50 whether or not you could understand him.
I was surprised, but it's a lot more English. It's very like home in a lot of ways.
Yeah, so how did
especially
you...
north of England, where we come from.
He was a die-hard fan of Manchester City FC, and this later led to a side gig reading soccer scores on the BBC. He might have been an asshole, but he was above all else a great musician and a very interesting person to read about. Up next is a band sharing its name with the world's largest global police force. I'm talking about Interpol. Now, I know what a lot of you are going to say in the comments. Interpol is indie rock. Post-punk revival is different from post-punk. Look, it's my video and I say post-punk revival qualifies as post-punk. I also wanted to include a newer band to show how the genre sustained and evolved over time. Also, their debut album, Turn on the Bright Lights, is one of my favorite records of all time, and I just wanted an excuse to talk about it. Founded in a city so nice they named it twice, Interpol had a lineup of Paul Banks on guitar and vocals, Daniel Kessler on guitar, Carlos Dengler on bass guitar, and Sam Fogarino on drums. Their sound was centered around their two guitars, often playing different lines, and the sweet bass lines of Carlos D. They first garnered attention with a 3-song self-titled EP, and their debut album, whose name I've already mentioned, would be released on August 19th, 2002. Post-punk is often a sad genre. This album is sad, but in a different way. It's kind of sad where you're crying but smiling through it. The album starts out with Untitled, a song specifically written to open shows. Centered around an atmospheric, delay-heavy guitar line and a simplistic but groovy bass lick, it's the perfect way to open the album. This is followed by the terrific Obstacle 1. The guitar playing is nice, but it's Carlos D's funky bass line that really makes the song pop, and it's a song you can hardly resist singing along to. The other best song on this album is Stella Was a Diver, and She Was Always Down.
This one's called Stella Was a Diver and She's Always Down.
This song is what I mean when I describe the album's sadness. It's a perfectly melancholy track with a simple but nice lead guitar line and steady bass. The chorus makes you want to bob your head with your eyes closed, and the outro is just beautiful. Another highlight is PDA, an absolutely driving song that makes you want to almost headbang. As far as debut albums go, this is a masterpiece. Interpol released several more albums and are still active today. Carlos D would leave the group in 2009, and out of respect to him, Interpol have never replaced him, with Paul Banks playing bass on their albums and fill-ins playing with them live. I've listened to some of the albums they've put out since then, and while I enjoy them, Turn on the Bright Lights just scratches an itch that the others just can't. I apologize for what's basically been me venting about my love for Turn on the Bright Lights. Let's go back in time a little more and talk about Gang of Four. Also, I forgot that I also have Unknown Pleasures on vinyl, and I wish I had taken it out back when I was, still talking about Joy Division. Well, better late than never. The Gang of Four was a political faction established in Maoist China during the Cultural Revolution, consisting of Zhang Qing, Zhang Chunqiao, Yao Wenyuan, and Wang Hongwen. Wrong gang? Gang of Four was founded in 1976 in the flax capital of England, Leeds. They consisted of vocalist John King, guitarist and co-vocalist Andy Gill, bassist Dave Allen, and drummer Hugo Burnham. They had a very eclectic array of influences compared to some of their contemporaries. When viewing their Wikipedia page, since that's the extent of the research I do, I saw that they were categorized under the genres of dance punk and folk rock. Color me intrigued. They released their debut album, Entertainment, on September 25th, 1979. This album really demonstrates the sheer musical variety that post-punk has, since this sounds completely different from, say, Unknown Pleasures. This is by far the most upbeat album that I listened to while doing this video. It reminds me almost of Madness, the ska band. It starts out on a high note with Ether. It has dual lead vocals from King and Gill, and the bass line is doing a lot of crazy bends that were the main thing I noticed throughout the song. Toward the middle, the guitar gets all dissonant and it's a cool effect. The nice guitar playing continues on the following track, Naturals, where the guitar playing has a very dance-like feel to it. Gill has a very cool guitar tone, super sharp. It honestly reminds me slightly of Big Black, but with no distortion. He does a lot of fast, alternate picked chords onto high strings, and it has sort of a flicking effect. The drumming is also well done. It's a small thing, but the snare drum is used super effectively. Burnham does a lot of, not exactly fills, but a lot of quick snare hits when you wouldn't expect there to be one. It really adds to the rhythm. Burnham also plays a cool dance-like bass line on Not Great Men, and a sweet tom-heavy bass line on Guns Before Butter. The bass playing is terrific, especially on Damaged Goods and the aforementioned Ether. At this point, it should be obvious to you that good post-punk needs a great bass player. Gang of Four would release multiple more albums, their most recent being 2019's Happy Now. Gill tragically passed away in 2020 and would be replaced by David Pajo of Slint. Up next, we have a band that I chose to include in this video almost entirely based on their name, Echo and the Bunnymen. The second greatest band to ever come out of Liverpool, Echo and the Bunnymen play a style of post-punk heavily influenced by psychedelic music and new wave. They use strings and synthesizers a lot more than other bands in the genre do, and I initially was torn over whether or not I should include them before deciding, you know what, it's a diverse genre, I say they qualify. Founded in 1978, their original lineup consisted of singer Ian McCulloch, guitarist Will Sargent, bassist Les Pattinson, and drummer Pete DeFreitas. Don't ask which of them is Echo, they've never revealed. Their debut album, Crocodile, was released in 1980. Riding the wave of post-punk popularity, it was an immediate success, charting at 17 on the British charts, although it wouldn't be until 1984 that they released their breakthrough album, Ocean Rain. I listened to this album on Spotify, and within 10 seconds of hitting play, I thought to myself, oh my god, this is the gayest album I've ever heard. On the opening track, Silver, the aforementioned strings are absolutely sweeping, and the reverb-laden guitar only adds to the immensely homosexual vibe. McCulloch's singing is very pretty, and there's a point where he outright starts singing La La La. Love it or hate it, this song certainly goes all out. This is followed by Nocturnal Me, a song that had me swaying my head from side to side almost immediately. It's a song dominated by strings, so it's nice that they gave Sargent a chance to chill and just play rhythm guitar. The big hit from this album, Killing Moon, is a song that I'd heard multiple times before listening to this album without actually knowing what it was called. You can see why this is the most popular song, since the acoustic guitar playing is super nice and the vocal melody by McCulloch is beautiful. It's really what makes the song. It does admittedly go on for a full minute longer than it really should, but oh well. Other album highlights are Thorn of Crowns, with its sweet drum work and vocals which sound like McCulloch is orgasming, and Seven Seas. The bass guitar on this album is a lot less noticeable than it is on other post-punk releases. No disrespect to Pattinson, it's what fits the songs, and with how heavily orchestrated they are, it would only be distracting to have super prominent bass. Echo and the Bunnymen are still going today, although they're operating in duo form with McCulloch and Sargent being backed by an array of session and live musicians. They've released multiple albums since, with one of them sharing its name with a question my family frequently asks me. So there you have it. Post-punk is a genre with tons of diversity. Whether you want to wallow in depression, get up and dance, or find yourself attracted to someone of the same sex, this genre's got you covered. Some of it's rooted more in punk's roots, while others is more grand. Now that I've done a fair amount of talking, I want you to do a fair amount of listening. Take each of the bands I've listened about and go listen to some of their music. If you like it, congratulations, you have new music to add to your rotation. If not, hey, at least you tried something new. If you're still watching by now, I just want to say thank you so much for giving me your time. If you like what you saw, be sure to like and hit subscribe. I make these videos whenever I can, and I always have a ton of fun making them. Hopefully you have as much fun watching them. If you have an idea for something you want me to do a video on, leave it down in the comments. Who knows, maybe I'll get to it. I'm Robbie J2734. I will see you when I see you next.